G'day and welcome to Runners Radio. I am your host, Rick Mirabella, and today, a bit of a different episode of the Coach's Corner. Now, normally we have experts on talking about subjects, be it Lukey McElroy or Dr. Stephen King. Today we've got Stephen King's founding partner of the Injury Rehab Centre in Melbourne here, and the movement assessment technologies, which is going gangbusters, and it is the first of its kind worldwide. We welcome him here today on a bit of a different journey. He will be touching on obviously lots of expert subjects, but today it's a little bit more about him, which, looking at him, I reckon he doesn't mind a bit. I welcome Andrew Lemon.
Thank you for having me. Do I say Rick or do I say Richard? Do I say Diego?
You can say whatever you say. Kingy's gone down that route before.
Yeah, he told me that.
Very low-hanging fruit everywhere. See, I just give these boys so many opportunities to have a go.
He doesn't have a high class of humour.
Kingy.
So
always goes.
We'll bring it up a level. I think.
He goes very lowbrow.
Yes.
Always goes for the easy targets, which is fair enough. Me and Kingy are both. Look at there. Lemo's got us on camera. Me and Kingy are both 5'6" on our tippy toes, so we do have to go that low-hanging fruit. But if you're looking on the camera now, Lemo's more your 6'2" type of European variety, just looking very attractive as we speak.
You're very kind.
And his hair is sitting beautifully. But Lemo's got a very different story on the podcast today to some of the normal experts. He's an athlete in the past, but as always with business comes responsibility. In the last 4 or 5 years, as it happens, he's obviously chopped away a little bit with that kind of stuff, buddy, and as I have as well.
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, it's a typical story, isn't it? You kind of pursue a passion, a project in the form of business, and of course, life probably gets a bit out of balance. And some of those passions that are usually sporting and usually activity-based are the things that are the first to go. So, yeah, I mean, I guess the story now is that I've thrown myself back in the other end. I'm kind of more on the patient or the client side now, and actually looking to take part in my first marathon this year. I've done a little bit of running, previously, but nothing up on the big marathon distance.
So tell us, mate. I've known Lemo for about 6 years and always been such an amazing professional to work with. We share, definitely in the over 100 patients together. With his athletic background, I knew he'd done a bit of sport, but because he's always been so intensely working, when he texted me about this marathon, I was stoked, and I was definitely shocked because I just didn't know you had the time to train. Tell us where it all began with this marathon talk, and then we'll get into what you'll be doing over the next 7 or 8 months. So Melbourne listeners, Melbourne Marathon, as we sit here today, is about 9 months away.
So I guess my background is, from a sporting sense, I've always actually done a bit more endurance-based sport. I mean, if you look at me, I'm not kind of built like the proverbial brick, whatever, but have usually been okay at the endurance-based activities. I was a rower, mostly as a lot of my sporting time, and I spent a lot of time coaching rowing as well, and found that running was something that I was okay at, not necessarily, competitively, but kind of enjoyed it as well, particularly when I had the opportunity to be fairly one-paced in my approach. And look, it's something that I've, done, more from a recreational and a fun standpoint. It helps keep you fit as well, which is always a good thing. And look, probably previously, like in terms of fun runs, I've done anywhere up to a half marathon on a couple of occasions. But as you kind of mentioned, of course, these things kind of fall by the wayside, and it's probably been a good 3 or 4 years, since I was really kind of running consistently and decent enough distances that I felt like I could kind of go out and have a good crack. But it wasn't until recently. Now I've got 2 younger sisters, and one of them recently got engaged, which we were all very, very happy about, to a guy that I've known for a while. And basically he's been getting into a bit of running himself. And the challenge was thrown down by this young upstart that he was going to take me at the marathon, and there was nothing that I was going to be able to do about it. So, of course, being a proud man and one that couldn't let some new buck come into the herd and kind of establish dominance, Obviously, this is something that I'm taking very, very seriously, and as I've kind of highlighted to him, I'm going to use every resource that I have available, which includes great minds like yourself, to make sure that not only am I going to beat him, but it's going to absolutely demolish his will and probably just establish myself as the alpha male of the family forevermore.
It's funny you said alpha male, because that's all I was thinking the last 90 seconds of that conversation. I love this. Look, there's nothing wrong with a bit of friendly banter between now family members, so that is fantastic. When you were talking about your last 4 years, I was pretty keen for the listeners to take that on board, because you've been so engrossed in all aspects of both companies and travel. Bloody oath, these guys travel a lot. If you remember Stephen King's episode, all around the world with their movement assessment technologies. Now, I tell you what, Lemo has always looked fit, but he never talks about himself as much as he's taken the piss a bit now. He really doesn't. So I had no idea about the rowing, and we've had many social nights together. I didn't know about any of that. So VO2 and all that stuff, lactate threshold's obviously been quite high in the past to be able to compete. And Brighton Grammar, yes,
yep,
which is a very good rowing and sporting school. So to be in that APS, you've got to be quite strong anyway. I tell you what, coming from that background gives me a bit more insight. Lemo, when he decided to run, what's your running been like as far as your longest run in the lake? Because I want the listeners to go to this, because this is what a marathon. I get lots of emails and phone calls, and obviously local people as well in Melbourne here. The marathon's obviously this amazing thing that people want to do, and it's one of my favourite distances. Probably 10K and the marathon. I know they seem very different, but to coach and to competing. But the marathon's a pretty beautiful distance, that 42.195. It holds a pretty big mystique for many, and I think me and Lemo would both agree with that. But I feel like I get a lot of emails across my desk from people that might not have even ran 5-10 years, or as getting back into sport after team sport and might have had 5 years out of the game. No doubt in your game it's exactly the same, because often I send them to Lemo to build their robust bodies first. Tell me about your last 6, 8, 10 weeks before that conversation at Christmas. Was there any running?
Mate, no,
Yeah.
absolutely zero.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. So now, with someone like Lemo, he's got a weights room, really nice weights room set up at his clinic. Tell me about your last 6 to 8 weeks after you've known about this bet, and then I'll probably lead you on about what some of the stuff we're going to do in 2019, leading him up to his specific phase.
Well, I mean, the first thing for me is that, having a very acute understanding of the danger of, people setting a goal and just jumping straight into it way too hard. I'm very acutely aware that is not the way to go about things. So in the last little bit, since we've kind of chatted and probably highlighted the fact that this was a goal that I was going to have a crack at, there has been a little bit of running, but really, small distances here. I mean, we're kind of doing maybe 3K runs, and it's maybe once or twice a week. There was a good period there where I was hanging out with a good friend of mine up in Sydney. We were living the Sydney best life, go for a run down to the harbour and go for a swim in the pool and kind of run back, which was pretty awesome. But not a great deal at this stage, because really, my feeling is that what I need to kind of work on and develop first of all is a little bit more of a strength base. So last week actually we tested out my strength doing one of our super session assessments that we do at the clinic there, where we use a lot of the assessment technology that we have to be able to identify, I guess, a lot of the deficiencies, the discrepancies, the imbalances that people might have physically, that it can obviously predispose with the repetitive nature of running. And so interestingly, I kind of knew I was going to get these results, but huge weaknesses I have on my left side, as well as then some kind of restrictions and some limitations in some of the key flexibility points in through the lower limb. And so I've really been focusing, and my thought is at the moment is to kind of use this preparation time, I guess, to build up on some of that and start to address some of those issues while trying to build my capacity up from a strength standpoint, but then trying to just introduce, I guess, some of the more higher impact loading in short forms of running, just to, I guess, start to harden up some of the tissues and prepare them a little bit more.
So that's succincted brilliantly as well. So often we've got an expert here who, the amount of runners and triathletes that me and Lemo have shared, often for the case of not preparing properly before they got, or just overloading too quickly. He's obviously acutely aware, as he mentioned, about not building up too quickly. And if any listener listened to me and Kingy talk a few episodes back about the basics before you start a heavy running program, which is why I really was keen to get Leno on before he started running seriously, that is key. Now these guys in this area of the world especially changed the game a bit 5 or 6 years ago with the way they started really assessing patients, and they helped me significantly with a lot of my athletes, to the point of I introduced it in all my S&C programs with well over 200 athletes, and I tell you what, the injury rate decreased significantly, like ridiculously amount, and it's so noticeable, not just for me but my athletes. They say, like, we're in the injury room or the rehab room never, so they might get some treatment of these guys every now and then just to touch base. But Lemo, I guess, summed it up perfectly. He's an expert in the field, but he's still got extreme weaknesses or discrepancies on his left side. With your mobility, was it the lower limbs? So you're talking ankle issues on. So that was basic, the movement assessment tool,
Yep.
Basic stuff like that.
Yeah, so we did some assessment using the movement assessment tool, which is really just a tool that we designed to be able to specifically assess a lot of flexibility, balance, control, as well as maybe some power-based activities. And yeah, the big finding, which I knew it was there, but I hadn't tested myself on it for a while, and I was actually surprised that some of the results, which are maybe a little bit worse than I've previously had, particularly around the foot and the ankle. So I've always had maybe a bit of a discrepancy from side to side, but it's actually one that's crept out into what we'd call a clinically relevant number. So we know from the research that certain numbers, if someone's falling within those ranges, then often that's something that might be clinically relevant in the presentation. Now, I don't have any pain right now, because I haven't obviously built up an extensive amount of volume that would maybe turn those discrepancies or those issues into something that might be causing of an injury or some type of repetitive stress issue. But certainly from those findings, that was one thing that was really interesting. But the one that was actually the most fascinating was when we do a balance reach assessment, which is one that we commonly perform using that, which is a really great assessment for a general lower limb health and function. I was absolutely way out, particularly on the left versus the right, to the point where it was almost probably 15-20%. Now, usually anything greater than greater than 5% is kind of a
Cause for concern. And with that, I want you to, I know this is generalising, but your discrepancies, because this is what listeners will probably be able to resonate with, your discrepancies that you just mentioned, mobility, balance, and even that lack of strength on the left side, which was performed on a leg press, leg extension, hamstring curl?
Yeah, so we did an isolated testing through some of that machinery, as well as we use a lot of strength testing equipment that can
force plates.
Force plates, and utilising other technology and hardware that specifically measures, I guess, where some of those discrepancies might be. And yeah, just a massive difference, 40% difference on my left side.
So with that, the 40% difference, the 20% difference on the balance, can you tell the listeners, if you were to be blind to all this knowledge and you started on a program, let's just say I designed you up a 10-week prep and a 16-week specific phase, what you reckon, what would be the main 2 or 3 issues you'd have from it? How would they present on an injury sense?
Well, I reckon the first thing that always happens is, particularly when it comes to running, is it's always an overloading based thing. I mean, if we look at what the common running injuries are, they're usually tendon-based issues. So, that could be a plantar fascia type issue, it could be an Achilles tendon type issue, it could be a patella tendon issue, maybe an iliotibial band, IT band type issue, or maybe even through the hip through there. And often they're probably some of the go-to ones that are repetitive stress type problems. The other ones, of course, are there's patellofemoral type pain, so where the kneecap joint becomes inflamed and irritated. And then, of course, then we can have a whole host of different things. But really, I mean, the reason why that occurs is always the same. When we run, there are really high levels of force that go through the body and have to be absorbed or transferred through there so that they can be tolerated. Now, when we go to the research, often that can be 2, 3, sometimes even 4 times body weight worth of force. Now, I weigh in at about 78 kilos or so, but let's round it up to 80. So if I'm running along, there's probably a fair chance that I'm dealing with 160 to 240 kilos worth of force that has to go somewhere. Now, if it can't go into the muscles and it can't go into the tendons and the ligaments and the other tissues, then it has to go somewhere else. And that's where, potentially those joints or potentially those tendons or those ligaments often get overloaded, or something just becomes, there's too much stress and strain for what it can tolerate. And that's where those issues arise. So given the fact that I am, actually quite imbalanced in terms of my strength, and that left side in particular is quite deficient, there's two scenarios that often play out. Now, often you would often think, I guess, that the weaker side is the one that's going to be definitely the one where you're going to develop those issues. So it's a weaker side, it definitely doesn't have the capacity to tolerate those forces that go through it. But sometimes it can actually be the flip side as well. Sometimes it's actually the stronger side that you end up, and this is where we also need to do a bit of analysis of running technique. We use some of the DorsaVi technology to be able to kind of assess that a little bit more. But sometimes as well, for some individuals, their compensations, because they are stronger on one side, almost means they kind of run a bit more through that side. And then often that can be the side that gets overloaded as well. So I think for me, the risk factors are probably, it probably is on that weaker side. And it's probably, in the past, it's been often, actually adductor kind of issues, and as well as kind of hip issues before, because that's where the majority of the weakness is for me.
Yeah, so like Lemo's just mentioned the big 6 or 7 running injuries, quote unquote, distance running injuries from, I guess, 1500 up. Team sport guys and guys that move in different planes, or athletes that move in different planes, obviously, there's other stuff at play, but anything like this, the Sergio playing, and he's running, Lemo's going to very soon spike his volume like 5,000% from what it was even 8 weeks ago. So he's just building up very, very slowly. But you can see how people fall into the trap of ongoing patellofemoral, ongoing Achilles tendon, all these kind of things, because basics aren't done right. So Lemo, just doing the basics right now, puts himself on a 4 to 6 week quite intense strength program, I can imagine. I'd be surmising, but yes.
Yep.
And then a little bit of extra mobility, because now he's got a plan, now he's got a goal. Now you can see why this time of year in Victoria and Australia in general, we've got 3 big races coming up in the next 5 months, and you can see why I'm so passionate about making sure every single person's on a structured plan, because I can't stand to have people guessing for one and just thinking they're going to go with the flow. So someone like Lemo's the king of plan, and he knows that he's got a plan 4 to 6 weeks before he even starts picking his mileage up. The running will come secondary for this kind of thing, because the hardest thing about getting to a marathon is actually getting to the start line. So there's no point Lemo building his base up in July, feeling like $1 million, and then gets it. The way it usually works is you get a bit of a niggle, you feel okay to run through it for a bit, then it becomes all empowering and totally engrossing, and you can only get out of bed some days. So we want to make sure we avoid that, because it looked pretty shit house. It was his company, and he's got an overuse injury, wouldn't it, buddy?
Mate, that isn't my concern at all. As you know, I'm 100% set on winning this marathon and beating.
Do you want to talk about? Have you spoken about times with the what's the young fella's name?
His name's Lockie. Yeah, we mention him. Look, we haven't spoken about times. Look, my auntie actually is a very experienced marathon runner, and I was having a chat with her the other day, and she said, if you don't run under 4 hours, you might as well have not even shown up. So that was probably, once again, family members getting involved.
Yeah, she's only being facetious for those listeners. She's only having a dig at Andrew and Lockie. There's absolutely no shame at all in running over 4 hours. He's laughing as we say this. Believe me, we've always said, and all the elites will tell you, that running over 4 hours is probably physically and mentally a shitload tougher anyway. So Lemo they're obviously got a bit of rivalry in the family. I like it. So she's obviously a very good runner herself.
Very, very good.
We never normally talk about times in this kind of podcast, especially when we're talking about injury prevention. But I just wanted to get a bit of a gauge on him, on Lemo's and Lockie's rivalry, and I get the feeling that it is got a little bit of spice about it. Now I reckon we should make it a bit more interesting, put a genuine bet on, like some form of shaming bells.
Oh well, I mean that could be the next level. And look, I mean Lockie's a good sport. I reckon he'd be up for it as well.
So he's listening to this, possibly, hopefully everyone is. He's obviously getting all your IP.
Yeah, well look.
Has he been following your IP?
Well look, I feel like this kind of, I mean, as I said, I've got a lot of resources at my disposal. I could, potentially use those in secret, and maybe it makes it unfair. I mean, the point is, I put all this stuff out there because that way it evens the playing field, and really then there can only be one winner, and that winner is whoever is actually the strongest and the most capable.
I like it. I do like it. So back to Lemo's running journey. So I've got a very easy case because Lemo knows, especially about biomechanics, he's forgotten more than we all know. But now I start to build him, and I actually get a pretty good clean canvas because he's doing his strength work. So I know when he actually comes to see me for some basic planning, someone like Lemo who's got a really good base in running but might have had a 3 or 4 year hiatus, and if you're listening at home, I would certainly suggest building up the volume very slowly, and that's pretty basic, I know. But you might decide to have a little micro cycle of just 7-day cycles, and just literally Monday to Sunday, and I would definitely get breathless once a week in there. It doesn't have to be too high intensity. So for someone like Lemo in his first 8 weeks, we might have him running no more than 2 hours a week, literally. So it's more about minutes than miles at the moment, especially in that first phase. So you mentioned he might be doing 3 runs and a couple of maybe 3 half-an-hour runs, basic stuff for someone like Lemo. And the middle part of the week, we often have beginners obviously come into Runners, so we'll build them up, but we'll treat them more like tempo sessions. Okay, so they might be with us in the big groups, but they will definitely be one a week or just be tempo, literally. So they'll still get a lot of stimulus out of that. They'll still get breathless and uncomfortable. They'll definitely adapt, but there's not the point where we're not hitting near that point of diminishing returns where we could get injured just from running quicker than we're ready to. So someone like Lemo, let's use him as an example. Let's say he's got a trainer on his own the whole time. He'll do an easy 30-minute run, and then he might do an easy progressive run. This is in his base phase where he might just pick it up on feel every 5 or 6 minutes. And that's a good feeling for confidence psychologically. Physiologically, we're tapping on all the factors we want to tap on. So if you say 30-minute run around the block or whatever, in 6 minutes I generally pick it up. So you might start out at something like 6-minute Ks and end up at closer to 4 by the end. So building up his confidence, touching on every energy system. Biomechanically, he's really changing strides and changing paces, so he's hopefully running a pretty similar cadence the whole way, but he's really putting his tissue under stress like he spoke about earlier. And then the last run of the week in that base phase, so the first 8 weeks before we even touch on program, we'll start to build his running up on the weekend from 30 minutes closer to an hour. Before we even touch on his 16-week program that we're going to commence, so often I work in 16 or 20-week blocks the last 4 or 5 months before a marathon, depends on how much time. You'd be surprised how many times people give me 8 weeks. But you can only advise the best you can.
Yeah.
And as you know, mate, most people that have got their heart set on something want to do it anyway. I usually suggest at least 6 months, and that's minimum, to at least get. I love sending people, as you do, to a start line feeling really confident. There's always going to be a little bit of nerves, but you want to be confident in what you, and I want to feel good about it. I don't want to be nervous for them. So someone like Lemo, we've got plenty of time. So then 8 weeks, listeners, if you build it up for an hour on the Saturdays, which someone as fit as this, it'll come back really quick. And if it's taking longer to get used, give yourself longer before you start. Because again, it's not about building up to 25, 30K in this initial phase. The breathlessness is gold because they both help each other. So a 60-minute easy run for Lemo is really going to complement that progressive tempo run, and vice versa. So they do come into runners here, they really are building up that engine, okay, building up that ability to tolerate, building up that buffer of lactate, and of course improving VO2. Running economy, what Lemo's talking about in the weights room, it significantly helps running economy, which I still think is the most important variable. But then the other thing that helps running economy is actually running, because it is a skill. Lemo's a very big golfer, and he's worked with a lot of very, very good golfers. Running, as much as people would scoff, is as much a skill as playing golf. Probably not as anger inducing.
Maybe not.
I feel a lot better after a run than if I play golf and break a club.
This is very true. But it's funny actually you draw that analogy, because I say that quite often to a lot of our runners, is that, no one teaches you how to run often, in the same way that no one really teaches you how to swing a golf club for the first time. There is, though, I guess, some fundamentals in terms of technique and the skill that's involved that apply in the same way, just in the same way that you could swing a golf club any old way. And there's some people who swing it pretty ugly, including myself, who maybe do so effectively.
Modesty is false.
No, it's no good. But the point is, though, that there are some key kind of parts of that skills, key parts of that technique that will get you there in a more efficient and more, I guess, powerful and a higher performing way. And I guess the same is true for running.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with running, so this is one of my big passions, because I love, at the end of the day, as a coach, you look at the variables that can improve your athlete, as a human, obviously, and as an athlete. So those are the two things we really look at every day, all day. Running economy is hugely underrated. I don't think it's as underrated as it was when I first started 15 years ago, but geez, it's underrated still. And you look at all the best in the world, and even the best age groupers, and even the best runners out on Beach Road in Melbourne, and efficiency is crucial. And I tell you what, even if the VO2 lacks a bit, or their work capacity lacks a bit, as long as you're efficient and you've got quite good aerobic capacity, you can usually get through these kind of events quite well, probably better than most. Your 5K time has to really work, and that's what we work on, a lot of your 5 and 10K times as a rule, and then all the long capacity I program outside. But someone like Lemo's quite fit, and we've got to make sure we build it up properly, because his only problem will be braking. And we're not going to let him break, because hopefully we've got the resources at our disposal. But at the end of the day, sometimes you can't have that either. But with Lemo and his running, that's what we want to build up the next 8 weeks. We're going to get Lemo back on in the next couple of months to tell us how he's going. We'll probably get him in his prep phase. I don't even want to talk about the last 4 or 5 months yet, because that's pretty specific. And I think a lot of marathoners coming up to, well, obviously the Europeans have got London coming up, so there's a couple of big, and Tokyo next week. So there's a couple of big, not that it's in Europe, but there's a couple of big majors coming up that hopefully you guys are ready for. I doubt I'll be getting any programs for London, because it's literally 2.5 months away. Lemo will get back on in the next 6 weeks and tell us how he's going. Before we get off, mate, the next 3 or 4 weeks, have you got any tips just for the listeners if they're on a similar path to you? Let's just say, currently, we don't like to date this, but currently we are about to start February 2019. So we are 8.5 months away from race day. There could be many listeners, especially in this great state of ours. Is there any tips for you from the great Andrew Levin for you listeners at home that are thinking, possibly might, or possibly won't? It all seems too hard.
Well, look, I think for me, let's come back to just like the simple reasons as to why we're doing it as well. As we kind of talked about, the last few years have been pretty busy, and it's probably been a time where, look, there's been, great progress and ambition and achievement, from a work standpoint, but that's just one part of my life. And so for me, the other reason, apart from wanting to beat my future brother-in-law, beat the absolute stuffing out of him on that, the other reason was I felt like I really needed to set myself a reason to get back on track with some of my own health and fitness. It's kind of starting to get a little bit older now. They're probably starting to notice a few things I used to get away with in terms of, eating and diet and kind of health and fitness that I'm not getting away with as well as I used to. And so, for me, it's really a case of having that long-term goal, having a great reason to actually implement this plan. Because I think unless, you actually have that finish line in sight, I guess, as you say, there's not really a great reason to put in that little bit extra and to, kind of get up that little bit earlier, maybe, get yourself a little bit more uncomfortable and things like that. Otherwise, it is very easy to go through the motions, which is what I've done, for the last kind of 3 or 4 years.
That's a great way to finish this particular startup with Lemo, because there'll be many people listening to this. They're just as busy. They might not be in business. Might be totally different. Like working mums. There's people that are flat out everywhere, and it's very easy to get in a rut. But once you get some structure around you that enables you to find some purpose, and it doesn't have to be a marathon because this is quite excessive, but it's doable, very doable for anyone out there with the right help. All it takes is a few weeks, and so the difference from day to day is the biggest thing. Lemo's productivity, hopefully at work, has gone right up, and just being, even if it's subconsciously, in a better spot. Okay, because there's no way Lemo could have continued to go on the way he was going in a work sense without something for himself. At least this thing is for yourself, as much as it's uncomfortable. There's no better feeling in the world than getting uncomfortable though, like breathless or in any setting, because it's going to make you a better person. So I feel like this is really massive, and that's why I was stoked when Lemo put the time aside to actually train for this. So I was really proud of him, but also because I reckon there's a lot of listeners in various boats that could really take a leaf, and hopefully if you listen to this in the next week or 2 or 3, you can really say, I'm going to jump on board and do exactly what Andy's doing. You can see all his strength stuff on Injury Rehab Centre, is that correct?
We'll be posting everything on the clinic social media platforms, which is Injury Rehab Centre, or you can go to injuryrehab.com.au.
We'll put a link up to both those and the MAT on the show notes, listeners. But we have got Lemo on, but we won't be the last time you hear from him on Coach's Corner. I'll give you the tip. We will endeavour to get him in the best shape of his life, but at the moment we're just building the foundation, which is so important. This has been Runners Radio. I implore you to do something today that's going to make you better tomorrow. Until next time. Well done, bro. That's very good.
Thanks, mate.
You're a guru. He's a guru, isn't he? Matt, listeners. That's very good.